The gavel cracked like a lightning snap against the bench, and for a moment, every sound in the courtroom fell away. I felt it in the bones of my hands, old teacher's hands, still steady when I choose to be, still lined with chalk dust no matter how many years have passed since I left my classroom. My name is Margaret Reed. I am 68 years old, and if you believe my niece, I am a thief. Across the aisle, she didn't look like a child anymore. Catherine, everyone calls her Kate, had her hair parted in a severe line and tucked behind gold earrings I knew she couldn't afford. The man next to her, her attorney, wore a blue tie that matched the sharpness of his voice. He stood with a thin binder and announced to a stranger in a black robe what I allegedly did to my own family. "Your Honor," he said, "we're here because my client's aunt exerted undue influence over a dying woman, isolated her from her daughter, concealed assets, and diverted a family estate that should rightfully pass to my client, Miss Catherine Reed." The words were clean and polished: stolen, concealed, diverted. He laid them out like polished stones, hoping the judge would cross the river on them without looking at the water beneath. I lifted my chin and kept my mouth shut. Someone once told me that children learn more from a pause than from the next sentence. I have never forgotten. Judge Miriam O'Neill, a woman with iron gray hair pinned without fuss and a gaze like a winter shoreline, looked down at us from the bench at King County Superior Court. "We will maintain order," she said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Ms. Reed, you'll have your opportunity to respond." I held the strap of my purse the way I used to hold a child's frightened hand. Inside, wrapped in a clean kitchen towel, was a metal tin that had once held butter cookies. Inside that, a flash drive and a sealed envelope. I had dug them up at dawn, while Seattle was still blue and quiet, from under the old sugar maple on the farm where my sister and I grew up. Some truths sit in the ground a long time before they're ready to be spoken aloud. "I understand," I told the judge. My voice sounded like it came from a wider place than my small body. Steady, careful, ready. The attorney in the blue tie pointed at me as if we were on opposite sides of a schoolyard and the bell had just rung. For 2 years, she isolated her sister, the decedent, from family. My client could reach her mother only through Miss Reed. That's classic control. Then, miraculously, a new will appears, cutting my client out. "We intend to show that will is invalid." His words made their way across the room and sat down next to me like uninvited company. New will, invalid, cut out. It isn't hard to dress a lie in Sunday clothes. "Sit," Judge O'Neill said to him gently. Then to me, "Miss Reed, I'd like to hear your account." Start at the beginning. The beginning lives in 2 places. The day my sister called, and the day the leaves turned red like they do every October. "My sister's name was Caroline Walsh," I said. "She was 62 when she died. She was my only sibling. When her husband left, she kept the farm out in Skagit Valley. 10 acres of maple and apple and pasture. She had a laugh like wind chimes and a spine like fence post cedar. She also had a daughter who went by Kate from the time she was old enough to refuse anything softer." Kate looked at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw the girl who used to braid her hair in my kitchen and steal the last biscuit. "She called me 6 years ago," I continued, "said she'd found a lump and didn't want to scare her daughter until she knew more." I drove up to La Conner that same afternoon with soup in a thermos and a grocery bag of practical things. Ginger tea, crackers, a clean notebook, 2 pens. I am an old woman. I solve fear with lists. I let the room see me smile at myself. The judge did not smile back, but the line of her mouth softened. 3 weeks later, the diagnosis was official: ovarian cancer. We made a plan. I'd handle the medical calendar, and she would tell Kate her own way. She did, by text, because she knew calling would make her cry. The next day, my phone lit up like a Christmas parade with messages from a number that said, London. At the table across the aisle, Kate shifted. The man in the blue tie put a hand on her sleeve. "I learned that Kate had gone overseas," I said. "A year-long assignment that had become 2, and a boyfriend who had become a fiancé, all of it wrapped in a story about a new life. She said she'd be home as soon as possible, which is the kind of phrase that keeps your heart on a hanger for months." "Your Honor," the blue tie cut in. "We're not disputing Ms. Walsh's illness. We're disputing the respondent's conduct during that period, the isolation, the alleged changes to testamentary documents." "You will have your turn," the judge said again. "Ms. Reed, go on." "Chemotherapy takes order and throws it in the laundry with all the wrong colors," I said. "Caroline needed rides, meals, someone to keep track of the pills with names that sound like hardware stores. I moved into the farmhouse's downstairs bedroom. I set out a jar labeled Good Days and one labeled Not Good Days, and we dropped pebbles in both and tried not to count." I paused. The courtroom swallow of silence felt real, the kind that comes when people who don't know you recognize themselves anyway. "Two things happened that year that matter here," I said. "The first is that Caroline's grandson came to live with us. The second is that she changed her will across the room." The attorney sat up straighter. Kate's hands tightened until her knuckles bleached. "Caroline's grandson?" the judge asked. "Whose child is this?" "Kate's," I said softly. "His name is Timothy, but he prefers Tim. He's 12 now. He's on the autism spectrum. He came to us at 6 when London became inconvenient, and the man she was planning to marry became impatient with the way Tim doesn't like loud restaurants or surprises. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to lay out facts. Tim needed quiet. He needed routines. He needed someone who would sit in a hallway outside a bathroom door while he brushed his teeth so he could be brave about mint and mirrors. Caroline loved that boy like oxygen. So did I. I could feel the room leaning in, the way a classroom leans when a story touches the place where the big feelings live. "The second thing," I said, "is paperwork." Caroline had a will drawn up when her husband left. It left the farm to Kate outright. That was before Tim, before the diagnosis, before Caroline watched me teach a child how to hold a fork without feeling like the world was a fire alarm. She said to me, on a day when Seattle rained sideways, "Meg, I need to make sure Tim will always have a home, even if grown-ups don't behave like they promise." We went to an attorney in Mount Vernon. She changed her will. She created a trust for the farm so it would always be used for education, childhood programs, and vocational training for kids like Tim, who need a quieter doorway into the world. She named me trustee until Tim turns 25, and then co-trustee with him. She left Kate personal property and a cash bequest. It was not spite. It was protection. The attorney in the blue tie stood. "Your Honor, we've already challenged the validity of that document." "Yes," I said, looking at him, "because you say I isolated my sister." That word, as if I locked her in the cellar. We had people in that house every single week, nurses, therapists, our pastor, neighbors who brought casseroles I returned with handwritten notes because that is how our people do it. Caroline was never alone, and she never lacked a phone or a voice. She talked to whoever she pleased, which was usually everybody Judge O'Neill steepled her fingers. "Ms. Reed, did you inform Ms. Catherine Reed of these changes at the time?" "I sent her an email the day after the signing," I said. She responded with a 6-word reply. "We'll revisit when Mom is better." I printed it. It is in the folder the clerk already has. The clerk nodded toward the bench. The judge glanced down and scanned with quick eyes. "Let's talk about Tim," I said. "Because this case isn't just about a will. It's about a boy." 6 months after the new will, we enrolled Tim in a local elementary school. He had an individualized education plan. He met a speech therapist who understood he listens better if you talk while building things with blocks. He learned to feed the chickens with me at dawn, which he liked because dawn is quiet. He learned that if he pressed his ear against the trunk of the big sugar maple by the fence line and closed his eyes, he could hear the wind inside the wood. He said it sounded like rain that hadn't decided whether to fall yet. I swallowed. "Some sentences you put in your pocket because they're worth saving. Ms. Reed," the judge said softly, "please proceed to the events most directly relevant to the contested will and the claim of asset diversion." "I will," I said, "but the thing about truth is that it fits together like quilt squares. Leave one out and it's not warm anymore." The judge nodded once. She understood. I kept going. "When Caroline started to decline, bills came due like waves," I said. "Copays. The part of medicine no one talks about because it sounds like complaining when you're lucky enough to have the medicine at all. I kept a ledger. The bank statements will show it. Every dollar that left Caroline's accounts paid for caregivers, a stair lift, home oxygen, and a case of Ensure that made us both laugh because it tastes like a melted pencil. The only money I ever moved without her saying the words out loud was the $10 I took from the jar by the back door because the feed store only takes cash for scratch grain. And I wrote that in the ledger with a note that I owed her 2 quarters for cake flour. A murmur broke like a sigh from the gallery. I watched the attorney's eyes flicker as if he hadn't planned for me to sound like a person. The accusation of diversion, I said, started during Caroline's last winter, and the person who made it is sitting across from me. Kate's eyes flashed. "You drained the accounts," she said, and the words were as blunt as a thrown cup. "You kept me from my mother. You locked me out. You and your small-town friends, and then you put your name where mine should have been. You always wanted the farm. I wanted my sister," I said. "I would have burned the farm down for her if that would have cured her. No document changes grief, and you were not kept from anything. You were gone." "Counsel," Judge O'Neill said, not unkindly, "advise your client she'll have a chance to testify." Kate sank back, lips pressed thin. The man in the blue tie put a paper in front of him as if it could be a shield. "Your Honor," I said, and I felt the weight of the tin in my purse like a pulse. "The words I have said so far will stand up on their own because they are plain truth. But I also have something more. Caroline left a message. She left it where no one would look if they were greedy, and I dug it up this morning. I took out the butter cookie tin and placed it on the table as gently as if it might bruise." The clerk stepped forward at the judge's tiny nod. She wore white gloves. She lifted the lid and set it aside. Inside lay a folded tea towel. Inside the towel, a battered flash drive wrapped in plastic and a sealed envelope with my sister's handwriting. I knew that handwriting well. I had seen it on birthday cards, grocery lists, and notes she tucked into Tim's lunchbox that said, "Remember you are brave," in all capital letters, because she believed in emphasis the way some people believe in fences. The judge leaned forward. The room leaned forward with her. "Explain," I said. 6 months before she died, I said, Caroline asked me to come outside. It was October, the kind of afternoon when every maple leaf looks like it swallowed the sun. She brought a small garden spade and an old Danish butter cookie tin. I joked that if we were burying cookies, we ought to eat 2 first. She pressed the spade into the dirt by the old maple and said, "Meg, if I'm wrong about anything on paper, if anyone tries to say I didn't know my mind, if the world gets loud and you need my voice, you come here." She slid the tin into the ground and patted the dirt down like a mother making a bed. "You'll know when to use it," she said. "There's a date written inside." In the silence that followed, I heard someone in the back row swallow a breath so hard it trembled. "This morning," I went on, "at dawn, before I put on my best shoes, I drove north. I parked by the fence line. I dug where we dug that day, and I found this tin. The envelope inside is addressed to me. The flash drive says, 'Play me first.' I did. It holds a video, a message from Caroline, dated 2 weeks after the signing of the will your court has in its record." "Ms. Reed," the judge said, her voice quiet as a lake. "Did you watch the video?" "I did. And I brought a copy you can view in chambers or wherever you deem proper. It's Caroline sitting at the kitchen table with the brown teapot and the silly rooster mug we fought over since we were 20. She looks thin, but she looks like herself. She says who she is, the date, and then she says this: 'I changed my will of my own will.' I asked for the farm to be placed in a trust for Tim and others like him, because that is the best use of our land. If anyone says Margaret made me do it, you tell them I've been bossing Margaret around since I was 5, and I'm not likely to stop now. If anyone says I didn't know what state I was in, you tell them I know I'm in Washington, and that means the apples are ready by October, and the hawks will break our hearts by December. Then she laughs at herself like she always did and takes a sip of tea. Then she says, "I hid a second paper if you need more black ink proof. It's under this drive in the tin. Hector and Pastor Lynn witnessed it for me. I didn't want to tell Kate because she stops listening when Money walks into the room. If she has changed, bless her. But if she hasn't, bless her and protect him." I had to stop there. Not because I couldn't speak, but because the memory of my sister's voice inside that stale kitchen air, mixed with dust motes and the sound of the refrigerator motor clicking on, washed over me like heat. The judge nodded to the clerk, who slit the envelope open with neat care. She scanned the letter, then brought it up to the bench. The judge read. Her face did not move much. She read quickly, then slowly, then looked up. "Counsel," she said to the man in the blue tie, "do you have any preliminary objection to viewing the video in chambers before we continue?" "We object to chain of custody and authenticity," he said promptly. "Noted," the judge said. "We will address that. But for now, the content is proffered. Ms. Reed, do you have the witnesses mentioned? Hector and Pastor Lynn?" "They're in the hall," I said, "because I asked them to come in case you needed them. Hector Alvarez was our neighbor for 40 years. He brought over a generator every ice storm without fail. Pastor Lynn Garrison has served St. Matthew's for 22 years. Both are ready to testify under oath. We'll hear from them," Judge O'Neill said. "But first, we will break for a short recess and view this video with counsel present." The gavel touched wood again, lighter this time, like a fingertips tap. People stood and stretched and turned toward their own concerns for a moment. I stayed in my seat. I put my hands flat against the table and thought about second graders lining up for recess, all of them doing something at once with more intention than most nations. Kate approached. Her lawyer moved to stop her. She kept walking. "Aunt Margaret," she said. The words came out thin. "Why did you dig it up now?" "Because you asked a judge to call me a thief," I said, not unkindly. She swallowed. "I didn't think you'd have anything like that." "I'm not surprised," I said. "You haven't thought of me as careful in a long time." Her mouth made a bitter shape. "You always think you know better." "I think I know how to keep promises," I said. "That's different." "I needed help," she said. "You never asked what I needed." "You wanted me to wire you money at odd hours, to hotels I couldn't pronounce," I said. "I asked for invoices." "You called me controlling. I sent you a prepaid card for groceries. You bought concert tickets. I didn't call that controlling. I called it misaligned." She flinched. The lawyer touched her elbow and guided her away. When the bailiff opened the side door, Judge O'Neill beckoned us. We followed to chambers, where the room felt smaller and less ceremonial, as if truth prefers the size of kitchens. A monitor waited on a credenza. The clerk set the flash drive in a sterile bag. A tech person from the court plugged in a copy. The screen woke. Caroline filled the frame with a kind of homemade dignity no camera can fake. She wore the green cardigan she kept for nice company. The rooster mug sat by her elbow. The timestamp in the corner marked a day I remembered for the cinnamon rolls I burned because I was trying to make them look like magazine photos. She said her name, the date, her address. She read a paragraph that matched the text in the letter. Then she went off script the way she always did when she felt something more than she could carry alone. "Tim," she said, looking square at the camera, "if you are watching this when you are big, I want you to know your grandma loves you like the morning loves the light. And Margaret, you are a bossy little sister too, and I'm grateful God sent me a bossy little sister because I needed one. Anyone who says otherwise can argue with me when we meet again, and I expect to be winning at dominoes by then." By the time the screen turned black, no one in the room had much to say. The attorney cleared his throat in the way men do when they need to hear their own voice to balance the air. "We still challenge authenticity," he said. "Video is easily fabricated." Judge O'Neill nodded. "We will hear from the witnesses." She looked at me. "Ms. Reed, did your sister ever communicate to Ms. Catherine Reed that she was changing her estate plan in this way?" "She sent an email," I said, "and 2 weeks later she called Kate." Kate didn't answer. Caroline left a voicemail. She wrote a letter and put it in the mail. The letter was returned unopened. I kept it. It's stamped and dated. Back in the courtroom, the day rearranged itself into testimony. Hector went first. He walked to the stand in his good hat and his best flannel. He said he was 80, that he could still split kindling cleaner than anyone on the street, and that his eyes weren't what they used to be, but his memory held steady. "Did you witness Ms. Walsh sign a codicil to a will?" the judge asked. "I did," he said. "Pastor Lynn and me. She read it out loud. She signed it. We signed. We had coffee cake Margaret baked. Too sweet. But I ate it because she looked proud." He smiled at me and I smiled back, because pride sometimes tastes like sugar and sometimes like sawdust, and you swallow both. Pastor Lynn testified next. Clear, kind, precise. She brought her church register showing she visited Caroline twice a week for months. She remembered the day of the codicil and the content, that the farm would go into a trust, that Margaret would serve as trustee, that Kate would receive a cash distribution from other assets and certain keepsakes, Caroline's silver bracelet, a quilt their mother made. It was not vindictive, she said. It was protective. Then came the part that made my hands go cold. The bank records. The attorney in the blue tie had wanted them. He believed they would show me moving money into my accounts. Instead, they showed 2 withdrawals made from Caroline's account while she was in the hospital. 2 cashier's checks issued on a Tuesday morning 3 months before she died. They totaled $17,000. The signature on the authorization page looked like Caroline's name had been written by someone who learned cursive from a bad book. The notary stamp belonged to a storefront office in Shoreline that, when called, said a young woman had come in with identification and a power of attorney already signed. "Who held Caroline's power of attorney at that time?" the judge asked, her voice sharpened by purpose. The clerk handed up a certified copy. Judge O'Neill read it and lifted her eyes. "It was granted to Ms. Reed," she said, meaning me. "Executed the year prior. Notarized by her attending physician's office at Swedish Medical Center with the physician present." She looked at the attorney. "Do you have evidence that this power of attorney was superseded?" The attorney shifted. "We will seek additional discovery." The judge set the paper down. "We'll mark the cashier's checks and the bank records for the court." "Ms. Reed, did you authorize those withdrawals?" "No," I said, "and the first time I saw those pages was in this courtroom." It was a tightrope of a moment. The room could have tipped either way. Then the therapist took the stand. Her name was Dr. Nina Patel. She wore a soft wool dress and spoke the way people do who have practice helping others breathe. Tim had been her patient for 4 years, she said. He had made what she called steady gains. He responded well to routines set by his grandmother and great aunt. He did not respond well to loud, abrupt changes or pressure. She had met Kate twice. Both times the meetings had decompensated into conflict. Her careful phrase for a bonfire started with wet wood. "What happened?" the judge asked. "Ms. Reed tried to compress 6 years of absence into 2 hours of expectation," Dr. Patel said. "She told Tim they were going to live in a different state with her fiancé." Tim covered his ears and rocked. He vocalized distress. Ms. Reed raised her voice. That was the end of the session. The attorney stood for cross. "Dr. Patel, is it possible Ms. Reed," he tilted his head toward me, "engaged in parental alienation?" Dr. Patel looked at him for a long moment. "Parental alienation implies a sustained campaign of manipulation," she said. "I saw an aunt and a grandmother who told a child hard truths quietly and consistently. I saw a mother who wanted results before relationship. It's not a diagnosis. It's a description. I rested my hands on my knees. I thought of Tim's hand on the maple trunk, hearing the wind speak old syllables. Your Honor," the attorney said, switching lanes, "none of this changes the central question. A suspicious will, witnessed at home, a video with questionable origin, and a woman," he pointed at me, "who has always resented my client for leaving this small life to make something bigger." I didn't look at him. I looked at the judge. "May I speak?" I asked. She nodded. "I taught second grade for 35 years, I said. The best thing about that is you learn what matters to people when they're still telling the truth, without thinking about how it will sound. Every child I ever taught wanted the same 3 things: to be safe, to be seen, and to be allowed to be who they are without someone trying to iron them flat. A farm is not a small life. A quiet life is not a failed one. My sister didn't change her will because she stopped loving her daughter. She changed it because she started loving her grandson in a way that required something different. I reached for the folder beside my purse. And because you've asked this court to decide whether I stole, I have one more thing. I took out printed sheets, text messages, highlighted by my friend Linda in yellow because my eyes aren't what they were and because Linda believes in the ministry of highlighters. I handed them to the clerk. "These are messages from Kate to me," I said, "dated last year and the year before. If you give me access to the accounts now, I'll stop talking about going to court. If you don't, I'll tell the police you forged things. Family doesn't do this to family. You owe me for the years you kept me out. And this one? If you sign the farm over, I'll let you stay in the little house out back until you die. That's fair." Kate stood, red flushing her skin. "Those were private," she said. "You're twisting everything." The judge picked up a page. "Ms. Reed," she said to Kate, "did you send these?" "My phone was stolen," Kate said. "My boyfriend, my ex, he texted some things pretending to be me." I heard the lie stumble over its own feet. The judge did too. "Is your ex the same individual who accompanied you to the notary in Shoreline?" Judge O'Neill asked. Her tone had gone from winter shoreline to knife. Kate's eyes darted. "Answer the judge," her lawyer hissed. "Yes," she whispered. "He knew people there." "What is his name?" the judge asked. "Rylan," she said, so softly the R hardly formed. "Rylan Brooks." The judge set the papers down, and a line appeared between her eyebrows that told me she was moving pieces around a board only she could see. Then, in a voice as clean as January air, she said, "We will take a brief recess. When we return, Ms. Reed, Catherine, you will testify." The gavel fell. The room exhaled. In the hallway, I leaned against a cool marble wall. I could feel my heart beating its steady metronome. Hector squeezed my shoulder. Pastor Lynn pressed a cough drop into my hand. Dr. Patel smiled at nothing in particular, which I recognized as one of the practiced tricks of people who help others through storms. Then I saw him. Tim. He stood with his school case, next to the court advocate assigned to him by the Guardian Ad Litem program. He had permission to come because Dr. Patel believed it would help him to see a place where adults spoke in order. "Hi, Aunt Meg," he said, in the flat, clear tone he uses when he isn't sure how loud his voice should be. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "Do you want some water?" He shook his head. "I want to tell the judge that the farm belongs to the chickens," he said, "and to the maple." And to anyone who likes quiet, I laughed, and then I remembered where we were, and I didn't. "The judge will understand," I said. In the way judges understanding, we went back in. Kate took the stand with the carriage of someone who had trained for this in a mirror. She told a story that had pieces of truth glinting like coins at the bottom of a fountain. She had left because opportunities beckoned. She had sent money, no receipts. She had called often, no logs. She had stayed away because I made it hard, no specifics. She said I had hated her for not staying in town and marrying the boy who worked at the feed store. I raised my eyebrows at that, because I had never planned my niece's life beyond wishing she would take her vitamin D. Her lawyer asked about the will. She called it suspicious. She said Caroline would never reduce her share. She called me fixated on small-town judgments. She cried at the mention of Tim. To her credit, the tears were real. Love and selfishness often share a front porch. Then the judge asked questions, and the room changed temperature. "Ms. Reed," the judge said, "where were you the week the cashier's checks were issued?" Kate stared. "London," she said. "Mostly." "Mostly?" She hesitated. Then it came out in a rush like water through drywall. "I flew to Seattle for 2 days, to talk to my mother, to get her out of the house, away from Margaret. Rylan knew a notary. He said it would make it easier to pay for better private care abroad. He said American doctors are lazy. He said a lot of things. I believed him." "Did you present a power of attorney to the bank?" the judge asked. She closed her eyes, then opened them and looked at me in a way that made me feel both older and somehow unseen. "Yes," she said. "He printed one. I signed her name. I was going to pay it back. I thought it was mine. I thought—" She clamped her lips on the sentence. The room listened to the part she didn't say. The judge's face did not change. Her voice did. "The court will refer the matter of those checks to the appropriate authorities," she said. "For now, we are deciding whether the will and codicil are valid, whether a trust exists, and whether there was undue influence." "Your Honor," I said quietly, "Tim is outside with his advocate. If it pleases the court, I'd like to ask him if he wants to speak, just to say where he feels safe, only if it's okay. He can also write it." The judge considered. "Briefly," she said, "if he's comfortable." The advocate brought him in. He did not look at the gallery or at the blue tie. He looked at the judge and at the flag and at the top of the maple picture I carry in my planner. He stood by the table, hands in his pockets. "Tim," the judge said, and her voice went soft without pretending, "do you know why you're here today?" He nodded. "You're going to put papers in a folder and then say words," he said, which is in essence what courts do. "Do you want to tell me where you feel most okay?" she asked. He thought. "At the farm," he said, "with Aunt Meg. With Grandma before she went where Grandpa went, with the maple, and with the chickens if the rooster is not mad." "Thank you," the judge said. "You may sit with your advocate again." He went, and the room breathed as if it had been holding itself still for those few sentences. We came to the end. The judge took everything under advisement. She asked for the bank's fraud unit report. She asked to review the video with a digital forensic specialist from the court's own office to be sure no cut had been made, no pixels rearranged. She asked for Pastor Lynn's pastoral notes, which she kept with careful neutrality, noting dates and times and whether Caroline had made tea or whether I had. The judge asked for proof of the email I sent to Kate about the will. I provided it with server metadata my neighbor's tech-savvy son extracted last night at his dining table between spoonfuls of cereal. Then the judge recessed us until the next morning. At dawn, the city blued again. I drove north once more, not because I needed anything from the farm, but because I needed to say good morning to a tree that had stood longer than all our arguments. I put my palm flat against the bark and listened for wind I could not hear in Seattle. It met my hand like a pulse you have to decide to feel. When we gathered again, the courtroom was the same, and also not. The judge came in, and her robe rustled in a way I had not noticed before, perhaps because my heart made less noise. She spoke without theatrics. Facts first, then findings in the shape of a careful sentence. "The court has reviewed the proffered video," she said. "Our digital forensics consultant confirms there is no sign of alteration. The timestamp correlates with the internal metadata. The setting, appearance, and speech of Ms. Walsh are consistent with contemporaneous testimony from witnesses and medical records." She looked at Kate. "The court has also reviewed bank records related to 2 cashier's checks issued 3 months prior to Ms. Walsh's death. The financial institution has flagged those transactions as likely fraudulent. This matter will be referred to the King County Prosecutor's Office for review. I make no finding today regarding criminal liability. That is not our purpose here." Her eyes moved to me. "Regarding the will and codicil, the evidence supports the conclusion that Ms. Walsh executed a valid estate plan of her own volition, while competent without undue influence from Ms. Margaret Reed. The trust provision for the farm is clear. The witnesses were credible. The pastoral notes corroborate capacity. The video further clarifies intent." She took a breath. The room took it with her. "The court therefore recognizes and admits the will and codicil. The Red Maple Trust is established and confirmed as written. Ms. Margaret Reed is appointed trustee pursuant to the instrument's terms. The farm property is placed into the trust for the purposes set forth therein: education, vocational training, and therapeutic use for children, including and especially Mr. Timothy Reed. The cash bequests to Ms. Catherine Reed will be distributed from remaining non-real property assets per the schedule in the instrument." Kate made a small sound, the kind a kettle makes when it realizes it will boil whether or not someone is standing nearby. As to Mr. Timothy Reed, the judge continued, the court recognizes his current placement with Ms. Reed as stable, beneficial, and in the child's best interests. Temporary guardianship is converted to permanent guardianship until he reaches the age of majority, with review every 12 months per statute. Ms. Catherine Reed's petition to be named guardian is denied at this time, without prejudice to revisit upon a substantial change in circumstances. Then came the part I had dreaded and expected in equal measure. Finally, Judge O'Neill said, the court has reviewed text messages submitted by Ms. Reed in which Ms. Catherine Reed appears to threaten to accuse her aunt of criminal conduct in exchange for financial control. Extortion is a serious allegation. I am obligated to refer these communications to the appropriate authorities for evaluation. Whether charges are pursued is not for this court to decide today. She lifted her gavel, then set it down without striking. Before I close, I am going to say something I do not often say from this bench. Families come here when they have failed to hold each other upright. Courts can assign paper to places. We cannot make people good to one another. That is work you must do without a robe looking over your shoulder. She looked at Kate and then at me, and then down at the table where Tim had rested his school case. We are adjourned. The gavel touched wood, and the sound this time felt like the soft click of a lamp being turned off at bedtime. Outside, under a sky that looked washed clean, we gathered our things. Hector hugged me with a farmer's careful force. Pastor Lynn squeezed my arm as if to tuck a prayer under my sleeve. Dr. Patel nodded in the way people do when they know their work was to stand steady while others shook. Kate stood a few feet away, talking too fast to her lawyer. He put his hand on her shoulder and left it there for a long moment. Then he left. She looked small. She looked like a girl who had lost the thread of a story she had told herself for years. She walked toward me. "Aunt Margaret?" she said. Her voice sounded scraped. "I can't go to jail." "You may not," I said. "That's not up to me." "Can you tell them not to?" She blinked hard. "You have power." "I have choices," I said. "That's different." The bailiff passed by and we both stepped out of the way. Tim tugged at my sleeve. "Can we go to the farm now?" he asked. "In a minute," I said. Kate scrubbed at her face with her sleeve. "I shouldn't have signed her name," she said. "Ryland said it would be easy. He said—" She stopped, the way people do when they realize the sentence will only make them smaller. "Kate," I said, "I'm not here to teach you a lesson in the way you think. Life will do that by itself. I'm here to tell you something simple. I will not ask the prosecutor for leniency. I will not ask for charges. I will not ask for severity. I will answer questions honestly if I'm asked. That's all. Do you hate me?" she asked. It came out in a child's voice. "No," I said, "but I do not trust you. That is a thing you will have to earn in a way you have not earned much in your life. If you ever want to know your son," I let the word sit long enough to belong to both of us, "you will start by showing up without an ask in your pocket. No deals, no threats, no if you then I. You will start with, 'I am here. I am sorry. What can I do that helps and does not harm?' And then you will do it for as long as it takes for someone other than you to say you have changed." She looked past me at Tim, who was studying the way the hall's light made the marble shine. "He doesn't look like me," she said, as if trying to find a familiar thing to hold. "He looks like himself," I said. We left. The first week after the hearing, I slept like I had taken off a backpack I didn't know I was wearing. The farm breathed. Tim fed the chickens at dawn and then came back to the kitchen to tell me how many eggs were warm in the nesting boxes. He lined them up and counted. He tapped one gently and said, "Not a dinosaur." I wrote a thank you note to Pastor Lynn and included a slice of apple cake wrapped in wax paper because I don't know how to say thank you in a way that feels large enough without sugar. The prosecutor's office called. They asked for statements. I gave them what they asked for. They said they would review and decide. I did not pray for a particular outcome. I prayed for truth to do what truth does when it is given time. Kate did not call for a while. Then she did, but not to me. She called Dr. Patel. She asked if there was a group for parents who had failed their children and still wanted to learn how to show up. Dr. Patel told me that, not because she breached any confidence, but because she asked if I wanted to help pay for the group. I said I would, on one condition, that Kate not know. Dr. Patel said that condition had already occurred to her. We have all lived in a world where strings appear on gifts like weeds. 2 months later, Kate came to the farm. She parked by the maple and sat in her car for a long time. I made 2 mugs of tea and set them on the porch railing. I did not call her in. When she came up the steps, she looked older and less lacquered. She said hello to the air and to the chickens and to the wind. She said, "I would like to sit with you and not ask for anything." We sat. We watched Tim stack wood with a precision that pleased him down to the sound each log made when it slid into place. "I got a job," she said, "reception at a clinic near Ballard." "That's good," I said. "I took my name off Ryland's lease," she said. "He said I'd be sorry." I told him I already was. "That's good too," I said. "I start on Monday," she said, as if days had to be reconsidered one at a time. I didn't answer that one because it didn't ask for an answer. We sat until the light went gold and then thin. "May I come and help on Saturdays?" she asked finally. No talking. "Just work, chickens, the grass, whatever you say, yes," I said. "You may." On Saturdays, she came. She dug weeds until her palms blistered. She stacked wood and didn't complain when I told her to restack it because the ends weren't square. She carried water in metal pails with both hands and didn't set them down to look at her phone. She never asked about the trust, the accounts, the will. She once asked where the old cookie tin was buried, and I said it was back where it belonged. And she nodded as if that sentence had more than one meaning, and all of them were true. The prosecutor charged Ryland. They did not charge Kate. They cited cooperation, remorse. And the way the story of who pushed and who signed fell along a line prosecutable in one direction and arguable in the other. The judge assigned Kate to community service, 200 hours, at a center for families with children on the spectrum. She went every Tuesday and Thursday, and then she kept going after she had no hours left to count. A year became 2. Tim turned 14 and then 15. He grew out of 3 pairs of boots and into a body he found puzzling and occasionally funny. He joined a robotics club that met in a barn where everything smelled like oil and hope. He learned to say, "I need a break," out loud before the room got too bright. He learned to take eggs to the neighbors and say, "We have extra." He ate 1 carrot from the garden with the same seriousness he gave to equations, then declared that carrots were not as good as people said. I told him that was fine. Taste is a democracy. The trust built a program with 2 other families and a retired carpenter named Joe, who knew more about ramps than anyone I have ever met. We hosted Saturday workshops where kids learned to plane wood and listen to the sound of a blade singing through cedar. Tim taught the other kids how to hear the wind in the maple. Some of them pressed their faces against the bark and laughed. Some of them stood 2 feet away and nodded. Both were right. Kate finished her community service and stayed at the center. She got paid more. She wore comfortable shoes. She brought coffee for the other staff and didn't fiddle with her phone while anyone talked about their child's meltdown at Target. She did not call herself redeemed. She did not call herself anything for a while. She moved to a small apartment she could afford and cleaned it on Saturdays after the farm. Sometimes she cried while she swept, which she told me without asking me to fix it. I said crying is like rain. You don't command it, but you keep a towel handy. When the 2nd anniversary of the hearing came, we went to the farm early. It was October again. The maple had gone the color of a stop sign, giving the world permission to pause. I put coffee cakes on the table. Hector came with his good hat. Pastor Lynn brought a prayer she read without closing her eyes, because I have always preferred prayers that watch the world while they're being said. Kate arrived with a banner the kids made at the center. It said, "Open hands, open gate" in crooked letters, which looked exactly right to me. She hung it on the fence. Then she came to the porch where I stood with my sister's green cardigan folded over my arm. "I brought something," I said. She looked down. "Is that Mom's?" she asked. "It is." She nodded, and her face did a thing that reminded me of her at 7, standing in the kitchen in socks that slid on the linoleum, braced for a reprimand that didn't come. "I'd like you to keep it at your place," I said, "and bring it here when it's cold. That way it belongs to both of us, which is how some things should be." She took it like a person who has learned the weight of gifts. "Meg," she said, stumbling over my name for me the way she used to when she was little and called me Aunt Make because she thought I made the world. "Can I ask something?" "You can ask," I said. "What I can answer, I will." "Do you forgive me?" Her voice didn't wobble this time. It was as even as a level resting on a beam. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said. "Forgiveness isn't permission. It's a door that lets me walk around without carrying your choices like a sack. Trust is different. Trust is earned by the day." She nodded and did not push for more. I loved her for that. I loved her for not asking me to skip the math. I loved her for tipping her face into the wind and letting it touch her without asking if she deserved it yet. Tim came up the steps with a hammer looped in his belt because he thinks wearing a tool is the same as carrying a purpose. He looked at us and then at the cake and then at the banner and then at the maple. "Is it time?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "It is." We walked to the tree. I pressed my hand against the bark. Kate pressed hers against the other side. Tim stood with his ear to the wood, listening to the wind talk in its slow language. It sounded like water. It sounded like time. It sounded like what it feels like to be held accountable in a way that does not crush you. "I hear it," he said. "It says the farm belongs to the chickens and the maple and to me when I am ready." "It also belongs to the kids who haven't come here yet," I said, "and to people who don't know they need quiet until they're in it." We ate cake on the porch. We told stories about Caroline that made the morning brighter. Hector fell asleep sitting up because he will do that anywhere after cake. Pastor Lynn wiped a crumb from the corner of her mouth with the back of her hand because manners, like trees, have seasons. On my kitchen table in a plain frame sits a photo of my sister wearing the green cardigan and making a face at me while I try to capture her not making a face. Next to it, I keep a printed line from the letter she left that morning buried under the maple. "Protect Tim. Protect what matters. Use what you have as if it belongs to the people who will come after you." I read it sometimes before bed, when the house is quiet except for the refrigerator's old hum and the sound of the dog settling into his circle. I am an old woman. My hands are still steady when I choose them to be. I know now that justice rarely comes with trumpets. It most often arrives like a farm morning, early, without ceremony, asking you to feed creatures who cannot feed themselves, asking you to notice what needs mending, asking you to turn the compost so what was discarded can become something that makes tomatoes taste like summer again. People ask me whether I won. I tell them a court confirmed what was already true. I tell them winning is a thin word for a day. When a judge speaks and you feel something heavy you were carrying, stand up and walk on its own feet. I tell them the best part is the part after, a Saturday when your niece shows up and doesn't expect anything but work. A Tuesday when a boy counts eggs and says, "None of them are dinosaurs," as if this clears up everything. A Thursday when you sit at a table and drink tea that tastes like grief, that has learned to speak softer. If you've listened this far, you know why I am telling you all this. You know that somewhere in your own drawer, you have a tin with something you buried, so you could find it when the world got loud. You know you have a maple, not always a tree, sometimes a place or a name or a promise that holds what is truest about you. On the days when the gavel falls hard and the air goes still, listen for wind in wood. Let it tell you what belongs to you to carry and what does not. Put your hand on what you love. Use your voice when you must, and your silence when it's kinder. Make a promise and keep it. That is the testament beneath the maple tree. It is not written only in ink. It is written in the shape of a life that holds. And if you want to tell me where you're listening from, I'll be here on the porch with a rooster mug, nodding at whatever the wind has decided to say today.